Good morning, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I wanted to let you know that I'm going to start with the stats as I always do. And this week we are down in numbers, obviously, because last week was reported the end of the month. We're always a little bit a week behind in regards to what we're recording or not recording, but what we're telling you in regards to the stats. And these used to be numbers that I actually got from the real estate boards, and they quit doing them the way that I wanted them to. They decided to change them a little bit, and so I'm going ahead and calculating them all on my own and figuring out exactly, what we want them to be. Not what we want them to be, but what we want to know. And basically what the bottom line is that the number of homes that sold last week was 763. Now that's down over 300 from the week before, again, because that was the end of the month. So that's normal, nothing to be concerned about. The list to selling price ratio stayed pretty consistent. Overall, 95% of asking under 250, and also 95% of asking under over $1 million. And then in between there, we're all at 98 and 99. And so basically that's what happens. Now, the thing that's to be of notice here is that this is the price that they sold at. So when you're, a lot of people will say when you're looking at putting their home on the market, they're saying, hey, I just want to have some room to negotiate. And so you're going to get that room to negotiate, but nobody's going to be negotiating at you at those main price points unless you're close to the price. So what that means is actually from 250,000 all the way up to $1 million that you're getting within 2% of asking price. And a lot of times you're getting more or even higher than that, like between 400 and 500, it's at 99% this week. And it's consistently there. And so what that really means is that basically the bottom line is that that people are looking at homes and making offers on homes in those price points that are really close to asking price. Or the price that they should sell at. And so, if we were looking at the original list price, then we would see that there was quite a bit of changes and everything that had been made on the purchase on the asking price and everything like that from the seller. And so that's something that you just really need to be aware of when you're doing that. What I have found in this market, because there is quite a bit of inventory, it's considered pretty much a normal market, meaning it's not really a buyer's market or a seller's market. But in this market, the buyers have choices. And so as a result of that, they're being pretty close to the vest in regards to what they're even looking at. If something looks like it's too high, they're not even looking at it. So basically the bottom line is when it comes to a seller out there selling a house, I think in my opinion, you really need to be close to what the amount is. Number one. Number two, if you're a buyer out there, I think that there are probably some houses out there that maybe you're not looking at because you say, hey, they're too high and I don't want to put myself into it and all of that kind of good stuff, but you can offer whatever you want to on it. Doesn't mean that they're going to accept it, but a lot of times they're just looking for somebody to come in, and that feedback's going to help them. So not that you want to help them with the feedback and saying, hey, your house is too high, but if it is something that would work for you, it might be worth looking at and making that lower offer. And the thing that I have found in that case, when you can actually let the seller know, hey, your house is priced too high and this is what we're willing to pay, there are many times that they will take it, or they're about ready for a price reduction, and you're not going to get into some kind of a bidding war and everything with it because everybody else was thinking like you were that, hey, they're too high and so I don't even want to mess with it. So basically, there are both sides to the equation there in regards to figuring it out. And it depends on how much you want that particular type of house and that kind of situation. And so that's what it comes down to, obviously, in everything. And so when we're looking at so that was a list to ask price ratio, and then we're looking at the months of inventory. And when we're looking at the overall, it's at 4.23, like I said, but under 250, we're only at 2.8. And then they're selling at 95% of asking. So you're thinking, well, that really doesn't make sense, right? Because if there's less inventory, they should be going to they should be closer to the asking price. And the bottom line is that that does not happen in that price range because with the median price being at 414, which is what it is this week, and if you're at a house under 250, then generally it needs some work. I remember somebody telling me a story about a property that they were advertising, and it was a house that should be about 400,000, but they were offering it at 250, and it had a fire and it had tremendous damage. But people weren't looking at the fire; they were just looking at, hey, that was a great house, and it should be worth 400. So there was a boatload of activity on it, right? It makes sense, and so. But they did get less than the 250 when they did get the offers for it because of the fire damage, because that's not something that everybody would be willing to take on. A lot of people that are getting a loan, the bank isn't going to allow a house that's in that kind of repair to do it. So then it does take it down to a specific cash type of seller. Or buyer. And so basically the bottom line is you have to just be aware of all of that. So that's why that under 250, even though the inventory is lower, that they are not getting as close to asking price. And then we go all the way up to $1 million in the 4 months of inventory, right around there, 3.45 under the 250 to 300. Then it's right at about 4 or so. And then it jumps to 5.1 for over $1 million. And they're always at about 95% of asking as well. Then we're going to jump to the condos and townhomes and villas. And basically, the bottom line for them is that our inventory on that is we're looking at 7.8 months of inventory. The number of properties that sold was 168, which was down 84 from the week before. So last week, it looked like there was a pretty average amount of inventory because it was the end of the month, but it is 7 months of inventory. So it is definitely a buyer's market when it comes to the condos, townhomes, and villas. And basically, when we're looking at the list to ask price ratio they're all 96 for the under 250. Then it goes to the 90s, high 97s, 98s, all the way through. Over $1 million, there were 2 of them that sold, and we sold at 90% of asking, whereas last week there was 1 that sold, and it sold for over 100% of asking. So again, on those higher ends, for the most part, they do ask for more. There is more room and that kind of stuff on there, and there are people that definitely do that out there, and that's, I think, because most of the stuff in over $1 million, people are looking at coming in there and making it their own. So they're looking at kind of the asking price as the price that they're going to put into the house, but they're spending that 10%, 5%, whatever it is, in basically, and usually it's about 10%, that they're going to be making that property their own. And so that's a lot of times what happens when it comes down to it. And so basically that's kind of what what's happening out there and everything. So last week the single family homes were at 404. This week they're at 415, right within that margin of changing from week to week. The condos, townhomes, and villas were at 300,000 last week. They're at 265, which for 300 was high. 265 is kind of more where we're at. and the number of active listings was 13,764, and now it's 13,962. So it's gone up 198 from week to week. So that kind of does it, for our stats this week. We've got lots of other great news that's coming up right after this. In order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So one of the things that I find that is interesting, that I really think is important when it comes to a buyer looking at a house and also a seller looking at selling their house, and that is the outdoor space and the curb appeal. Now, the most important thing, obviously, that is kind of getting people to the house in the first place is usually the pictures that people are seeing online today. And a lot of times there are buyers out there that are ignoring houses that they don't like they don't like the pictures that they see online, or they see something in a picture and they say, okay, that house isn't for me. So the online pictures are really important. They're kind of the first filter a lot of times for the buyers that are looking for homes. Now, the thing is that I've worked with thousands of buyers over the years and helped them find their properties. And the thing is that there are a lot of houses that, my buyers have overlooked, that I've said, hey, I think you really should look at this house. And so, it's on our way. Let's just go ahead and do it, in the middle of something else that we were looking at. And many times that is the house that they end up choosing. And so when that happens, usually the first or second time that I say, hey, we need to look at this house, and they look at it and they realize that it's closer than the ones that they picked that have the pictures, we kind of go with that. And so that's why very few people that I've sold to have picked their own home, that they've seen it on the internet or said, hey, I want to see this house. It's more me finding the house for them that they really want to buy. And it really saves them a lot of time, energy, and effort and all of that kind of thing in doing it. And, although it's, and honestly, if you're really looking for a house online, I think it's very, very difficult to do. You might think that it's easy. And once you get into it and you're like going, okay, well, and then you put yourself on a search and you're looking every single day at these houses and they don't match. And you're like going, oh my gosh, this is just taking an awful lot of my time. And I've got a client right now that's exactly what he's doing, is that he is looking every single day, and then he's choosing houses that don't match what he's looking for. He's looking for a property that has no rear neighbors. And so he's looking at these houses and he's going, well, they have, and saying, hey, I really like this house. I think it's a good deal. And I'm like, but the neighbor is right there. And you said you didn't want that. He goes, you're right. Because right now he's on a golf course. He has a golf course view. He has no rear neighbors, and he doesn't want to have neighbors. So then when you're going to compromise on that, because that's one of the most important things that he's got at his house, he likes to, sit out there, drink his coffee, all of that kind of stuff in the morning, and, just watch the sunrise there and all of those kinds of things. And then anytime you look out, it looks beautiful. It's maintained by somebody else. And so that's exactly what he's looking for. But yet he has many times sent me houses that have somebody that's right on top of them in the back. And I'm like, I'm happy to show that to you, but that's something that you said you definitely did not want. And so what I do is I go through and I find the houses that don't have any rear neighbors and send them to them and look at that. And so basically when it's coming down to it, whatever is most important to you is what we really need to look at. But one of the things that I think, as I was starting to say, is that curb appeal is something that I think a lot of sellers kind of negate, and they don't think it's that important. And it really and truly is. And many times it's what the neighbor's yard looks like and that kind of thing too. If, they come down there and all the neighbors, it's time to cut the grass, they're like going, oh my gosh, this looks like a slum and I don't want to live here. Not that it is, but that's what they're thinking in their brain. So you got to remember that the first impression is everything. And so the curb appeal of the house is critical when you're looking at it and figuring out, whether, what people want to do. So basically, what people are looking for is they want something that looks good, but also looks like it's low maintenance. If they're looking at your house and looking at the landscaping and they're looking at the garden and they're going, oh my gosh, this looks like a lot of work. It's going to be weekend projects. It's going to be something I'm going to have to do all the time. And it's not something that I do want to do all the time, then that's going to be a negative. But basically, the most important thing that they want to look is they want it to look good. They want it to look like it's easy. And then what most people want is they do want some kind of an outdoor lanai or a patio or something like that. And especially here in Central Florida, they do want to see that, that they've got some kind of a covered patio is really what they want, because sitting out there in the sun is not something that most people want all the time. A lot of people do want pools, but that's kind of a 50-50 thing. They are looking basically for things that look easy and that kind of thing. So if you've got an overgrown garden, that's going to be something that's going to be a negative. If the front yard looks like it needs attention, that's going to be a negative. And so basically, I've had many houses that people have come up to. They've looked at it in a picture or something like that, and then they've driven the neighborhood and they're like, no, we don't want to be here. There actually was a house that I sold, I think it was about a year ago or so. It's, time flies, so I really don't know. But basically, their house looked great. The curb appeal and everything looked great. The house across the street, not so much. Didn't look that good. And it was just that it was tenants that were living in it. They did not keep up the grass or anything like that consistently. And so it just really didn't look that great. And so, I told them, I said, hey, we're going to have that as an issue. And they knew it. And so, we did get by it and all of that kind of good stuff. Sold the house pretty quickly and everything like that. But they considered going and asking the neighbor if they minded if they cut the grass for them. And maybe that's what you need to do and everything like that. The next door neighbor was an older lady, and so they already were cutting her grass. So they said, maybe we'll go and ask them if we can cut theirs and that kind of stuff. And it didn't come to that, but there's sometimes where that might be an issue and it might be something that you want to look at and that you want to do. So you just have to look at everything from the whole big picture, look at what's going on, figure out what you want to do in regards to what with looking at it from a buyer's point of view is what you need to do. So I always suggest you just go out there and you take a picture and then you look at it and then you can become critical, of your house a little bit too. Maybe the door needs to be painted, and that would make a huge difference. I know my door is white and I was looking at it the other day and basically, I've got a wreath and that kind of thing on it. But, as the years have gone by, the wind has kind of made it so that it doesn't look as crisp as it should. And I'm like, okay, it's time to paint that door. It really needs to do that. And when you are, selling your house, you want to do that thing to make sure that the people are actually going to go in. Because there are many times when you're with a client like myself, a realtor out there with a client, and you're coming up to a house, that the inside, that it's probably going to be exactly what they want, but they just drive up and they say, nope, that's not what I want. And basically when it comes down to it, they're looking at the neighborhood the same way. Is that going to be something that they want? There was a house a couple of years ago, and this was, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, that I was selling that basically, the house was very big, gorgeous, upgrades galore, and all of that. A builder had built it for themselves in the middle of a neighborhood. So it was kind of an upgraded home in regards to the other ones in the neighborhood. Not significantly, but enough and everything. And so we had a buyer. The buyer was actually buying it from out of town. And then they came and they, looked at it for the inspection, and they decided, the house was great. They liked everything about it, but, and it had a view of a pond across the street, but the neighbor next door, they like to leave their garage door open and sit in their garage and just kind of watch the traffic. And that was something that they were not interested in. And so they did not like that neighborhood for that reason. And so there are certain things that you're not going to be able to do anything about, but the things that you can are things that you should do. And that means having it look like it's clean, low maintenance, rather than expensive or labor heavy projects are what you want to avoid. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So one of the things that I found basically interesting this week was an article, and I do believe that this is true, is it says that a new study found first-time buyers feel prepared but struggle with basic questions about costs and next steps. And so basically it was more than 2,000 first-time buyers ages 18 to 65 by Wells Fargo did this study and on mortgage and home buying. And 7 out of 10 said they felt knowledgeable, but 75% answered 4 or fewer questions correctly out of 12. So that's kind of bad when it comes to that. And so they really don't know. So there's a lot of assumptions basically that happen out there in regards to mortgages and buying a house and what it takes and all of that kind of good stuff. And if you haven't done it for a while, even though you're not a first-time buyer, it might be stuff that you don't know as well. And so basically what it could have, the knowledge gap could have real life financial consequences, as small as misunderstandings can lead to higher monthly payments, delayed purchases, or missed opportunities. And so they said that 25% of the people knew when to apply for a mortgage. So basically what it comes down to is that, when you're looking at a house, you definitely want to be pre-qualified, or pre-approved is really what you want to be. Pre-qualified, basically the difference between that and pre-approved is that pre-qualified, they ask you questions and then they say, hey, you're qualified for X amount. Pre-approved, they actually look at your stuff and they say, yeah, you definitely can buy a house for X amount. The thing is that I think the pre-approval is a much better way to go when you're going to do that, when you're going to start looking, because usually there are some things that you've forgotten about. And so you need to know about those because you don't want those to come and come back later. There was some people that I was working with a few years ago, and basically when it came down to it and they were, running their credit and all of that kind of stuff, they knew, they had a really good credit score. They knew all this kind of stuff and all that. And then it came up that there was another loan that they had out there that they co-signed for their child on buying a house. And that came up on their credit report that was using up some of the money that they could use to purchase, their home, because there are ratios that you have to maintain, that you can only have so much total debt, when it comes down to it, to buying a house. So usually it's about 50% overall. So if you've co-signed a car loan, or if you've co-signed a house loan or something like that, that's going to eat into the amount that you personally can buy when it comes to a house. And so they had no idea. And so they took a couple extra months. They rearranged things. They got their child that they paid off that loan. So they no longer had that as a restriction in regards to what they had and everything like that, and changed it and got the child to get their own loan and all of that to make it so that it worked. But basically, that was a big surprise to them, and that was after they had found a house that they liked, that they had the pre-approvals, the pre-qualification. So it really makes sense to go ahead and get the right information and the right thing that you need to have in order to have things happen. So that's the first thing, knowing when to apply for a mortgage. So get that pre-qualification or pre-approval. Gosh, I keep going back and forth. You need that pre-approval really before you go out there and look too seriously, because that's going to tell you what you really can afford. They're going to look at everything, and if there was something that you forgot, and that was just something that they forgot when they co-signed because they weren't paying the bill, they weren't thinking about it, and it had happened a few years ago. And so basically, you need to look at that. One of the things that it found in this survey of these 2,000 people is that 90% of the people did not understand what's involved in closing costs, which was the largest blind spot in the quiz that was done. And basically, I would believe that this is absolutely true. And this comes for sellers. I think it's kind of the opposite side of this, that it's not that you don't understand what's that you don't necessarily understand what's involved in the closing costs either. You're looking at that top line number. Hey, what am I getting for my house? Whereas the most important number is, what am I getting in my pocket, right? And so, because a lot of times when people think, hey, I'm getting this much for my house, that's how much money I'm getting in my pocket. And there are expenses. There's taxes on the deed that is a state tax. There are basically, the title insurance and those kinds of costs that are going to be. There's prorations that you're going to have on the taxes. There's the real estate fees. There's a lot of fees that are involved. I think there's about 10 to 15. So basically, when it comes down to it, again, when you're getting a pre-qualification as a buyer, we tell you to get the loan estimate, which the loan estimate is going to tell you basically, what your monthly payment's going to be, as well as what the costs and everything are going to be for that loan. And that's really important, in my opinion, to compare apples to apples, to compare the loan estimates from one mortgage person to the next, to see what it's going to be for you, because that's going to be a big difference too in the amount of money that you need to have down and everything, and the amount of money that you need to bring to closing. And so it's really important to look at the whole big picture. Again, 88% of the people were not clear on the first steps to take when beginning a home buying process, when it comes down to it and what you really want to do. And in my opinion, the first thing to do is to figure out exactly what is the thing that works for you. And then, maybe the first thing is getting in touch with someone like myself and actually sitting down and going through and finding out what you want. Then we get you set up with the loan and making sure that you've got that the way that you need it. Or if you're paying cash, then you've got that all set up and that kind of thing too. And with cash, there are also closing costs. So you need to know that and that kind of thing as well. The amount of money that you've got there may be exactly the amount you need, but you might need a little bit more. And then another thing that they found on this is that 80% of the people would make a critical mistake when submitting a competitive offer on a home, such as sharing the pre-approval letter for the maximum approval amount with the seller. Now, I disagree with that 100%. Basically, I think that you need to have a loan pre-approval letter. If you're buying a house that's $400,000 and you're pre-approved for $500,000, I say show them you're pre-approved for $500,000. And the reason for that is because it's not going to be close. It's going to be easy. It's going to be really good for them to do that. Them knowing that you have the ability to pay more is not going to be a negotiating tool and should not be a negotiating tool. So that's something that I definitely disagree with, that it's saying that you should have a pre-approval letter that's the same amount as what you're offering on the home. many times when you see that as a seller, you're going, okay, they're too close. What if something happens, that something comes up that they need to have a little bit more money, or if the interest rates change a little or something like that, then they're going to be out of the picture and you're going to have to go down in your price. So I would rather have someone on the sell side that they have more ability to pay than it's saying that they do on this particular article and everything like that. But basically, there is a clear opportunity for buyer education. And so basically what we do is we do have that buyer education. We actually sit down with every buyer before we go out with you, and we go through in regards to what the expectations are, what we can do for you, what's going to make sense, and all of those kinds of things to make things work for everybody regardless of what's going on. So that's kind of what the scoop is. And in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So another thing that I ran into this week is it was wondering if someone can do a quick claim deed to remove someone from a mortgage. So basically, a lot of times people do a quick claim deed in order to change the interest in a property, but it doesn't remove a borrower from a mortgage loan. So that can create problems after a divorce if the person later tries to qualify for a new mortgage, or if you think that that's something that you want to do, you don't get removed by the mortgage by a quitclaim deed. The other thing that a quitclaim deed does many times is a lot of people put it on there like, hey, we transferred this property for $100, and then they get a bill from the state for stamps on the deed saying, hey, you owe us X amount of money in order to because you changed ownership on the property. And then many times it also can go ahead and change something that comes to the property tax and that kind of stuff. So you have to be really careful in regards to what you have to do in order to make all of this kind of good stuff happen. So probably, in a divorce situation, that's a lot of times where there's a quick claim deed, or if it was a partnership or something like that. But you have to remember that the mortgage is completely different than the deed. So you might transfer the ownership of the house, but you still have the ownership on the mortgage. And when it comes to divorce, it really becomes tricky. It's a pretty traumatic time of people's lives. I don't like to see it, obviously, at all. And when people are going through that, when it comes to the house, I think there are some really important things that people need to consider when doing that. I actually have a report that people can get on divorce, and if you'd like it, just go ahead and text at 407-566-2555, and I'll get it off to you. But basically, I've had some pretty sad stories when it comes to divorce and houses, and when they didn't handle it properly in the divorce and that kind of thing. And for one of them was a guy that he was allowed to continue to live in the house. Both of the people owned it. He was going to get the profits of it when the house sold. The ex-wife went ahead and had gotten remarried and lived in another property and all of that kind of stuff. The guy could not afford the home anymore. It ended up being upside down because he was so late in the payments, and because he there were just a lot of things that happened in regards to that. And so there were a lot of legal fees and a lot of things that happened. I actually did get the ex-wife to sign the listing agreement, and so we were able to bring a contract to it that everything would have been whole and everything would have been great and all of that, but the ex-wife refused to sign the purchase and sale agreement, and so obviously she wasn't going to sign off on the title, and so basically the house had to go to foreclosure because there was nothing else that we could do. Now, unfortunately for the ex-wife as well, that foreclosure went on her record. Again, she was remarried. And it didn't matter because her new husband was taking care of everything and all of that kind of good stuff. But I still don't think you want a foreclosure on your record. It can stay on there for up to 7 years and people can look at it. You can't buy a house for 4 years in many times. And so, it's not really the best way to do it. So when people are doing a quick claim deed, a lot of times they just think they can go ahead and do it themselves, but they don't realize all of the consequences that come with it. And so I think it's really important that at least you would do it with the title company or with an attorney to make sure that, everything is, that what the scoop is. And, if the house is owned outright and there isn't any mortgage on it, then maybe that's the best way to do it. But again, many times I've found that probably just moving on from the house 100% for everybody is possibly the best thing to do. But, even if, you've got the divorce, you've got to show the divorce decree to the title company that says that the spouse is the one who gets it. So a lot of times it's better to do that stuff as you're going through the divorce process than wait for it to be later and all of that. So I think that basically when it comes down to it, you need to know what you're doing when it comes to those quick claim deeds. And a lot of people don't. They just think, hey, this is a quick Band-Aid. It solves our problem and we do what we need to do. But you don't look at the whole picture and everything when it comes down to it. And so definitely it's got to go through looking at what the loan is and what the best thing to happen about all of that is. And, when it comes down to it, if both people still own the home and they're going to split the profits when the one person sells it and the other person doesn't like when they're selling it or the amount they're getting for it, and there was already bad situation in regards to agreements, and opening up those old wounds are sometimes, I think, very difficult for people. And so the way that you handle that up front, just rip the Band-Aid off right away. Make sure that that house is handled, whether it's staying with one of the spouses or whether it's going to be sold overall. I was talking to another person this week that was talking about somebody that she was working with divorce, and it's a very messy divorce. And so, they're selling the house, but deciding even who's going to sell the house and how they're going to navigate those waters, I think is really important to make sure that, that you meet with both people meet with the realtor, maybe separately, to make sure that that it's like one person isn't getting what they want more than the other person and everything. And so it's a difficult situation, that people go through this. And so how you handle it is really the most important thing that I think that you're going to do, for your life and for the future and everything. And so maybe this report would help you. Not that I want to end the show on this, but basically I think that, life happens and there are things that we go through that are painful. And so how we can navigate through them is probably the best thing that we need to look at. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.